That was Vin Scully calling a perfect game, one of the 3 perfect games that he has called. Today on Crafting the Call, we are going to discuss the evolution of Vin Scully, the most famous baseball broadcaster of all time, and how he described perfect games. My name is Josh Suchon.
And I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler. We're 2 works in progress. We're talking about a man who described perfection. And the fun thing is, Josh, before we get into 1965, we just watched / listened to Vin Scully, before he was even out of his 20s, calling the very first no-hitter, let alone perfect game in World Series history. And you told me that Vin, when he looked back upon that call, said that was boring.
Yeah, the entire game was rebroadcast on MLB Network about 10 years or so ago. And when Vin was asked about it, he said he started to watch and he said he turned it off after a couple of innings because he was so bored with himself. And that's primarily because it was such a different style broadcast. Vin wasn't yet this master storyteller weaving in and out of the plays, because the newspaper men back then used to constantly harp on the announcers because they would never shut up. And so Vin was so self-conscious of it, he just said very few words between pitches.
If you think about the Titans of the time, that was the chief criticism of Mel Allen, was that Mel Allen always talked. You can find the full 9th inning of that Don Larsen perfect game, and Vin is just saying the pitch fouled away. But then he can't help himself, and he starts to describe Yankee Stadium shivering. And there's the Vin poetry to put with the great musicality of his words, the pacing and everything else that made him great. So he's 28 years old in 1956, and you go a decade later, and he's 37, and Sandy Koufax is at the top of his game. And this is the game, this is the 9th inning that has been written up. The words of Vin, they've transcribed them. And this has been the great compliment to give to a broadcaster, right? Is if Vin hadn't spoken them, they would have been beautifully as just the written word, as an essay to describe this 9th inning for Sandy.
And the great thing about why we even have this 9th inning is because Vin told the engineer, why don't you record this? I want to give a copy to Sandy so that he has a record of this, so he knows what it sounded like. It's before TV had taken over everything, obviously way before social media and internet and all that. And so they did not record every single inning of every single game. Vin spoke the words and it just went out there.
But that recalls to me in 1951, the shot heard around the world, Ernie Harwell on the TV call. So everybody's eyes and ears are on Ernie. There's Russ Hodges just delivering the radio call, and Ernie thought that he had the right end of the stick, but a guy named Goldberg was recording the broadcast, and he recorded Russ Hodges, and that is the call that lived on from 1951 and Bobby Thompson.
All right, you ready to listen to the entire 9th inning of the Koufax perfect game?
Let's dig in.
3 times in his sensational career has Sandy Koufax walked out to the mound to pitch a fateful 9th, where he turned in a no-hitter. But tonight, September the 9th, 1965, he made the toughest walk of his career, I'm sure, because through 8 innings, he has pitched a perfect game. He has struck out 11. He has retired 24 consecutive batters. And the first man he will look at is catcher Chris Cruz, big right-hand hitter. Fly to center, grounded to short. Dick Tracewski is now at second base, and Koufax ready and delivers. Curve ball for a strike. Oh, and 1 to count to Chris Cruz. Out on deck to pinch hit is one of the men we mentioned earlier as a possible Joey Amalfitano. Here's the strike 1 pitch to Cruz. Fastball swung on and missed. Strike 2. And you can almost taste the pressure now. Koufax lifted his cap, ran his fingers through his black hair, then pulled the cap back down, fussing at the bill. Cruz must feel it too as he backs out, heaves a sigh, took off his helmet, put it back on, and steps back up to the plate. Tracewski is over to his right to fill up the middle. Kennedy is deep to guard the line. The strike 2 pitch on the way, Fastball outside, ball one. Krug started to go after it and held up, and Torborg held the ball high in the air, trying to convince Vargo, but Eddie said, no, sir. 1-2, the count to Chris Krug. It is 9:41 p.m. on September the 9th. The 1-2 pitch on the way. Curveball, tapped foul off to the left of the plate. The Dodgers defensively. In this spine-tingling moment, Sandy Koufax and Jeff Torborg. The boys who will try and stop anything hit their way. Wes Parker, Dick Tracewski, Maury Wills, and John Kennedy. The outfield of Lou Johnson, Willie Davis, and Ron Fairley. And there's 29,000 people in the ballpark and 1 million butterflies. 29,139 paid. Koufax into his windup, and the 1-2 pitch. Fastball foul back out of play.
Josh, if you don't mind, there's a lot to talk about so far, but I want to quickly mention this was a Vin Scully philosophy that if you're in the 9th inning and there's a no-hitter at work, you give the defense again. You go through every single member of that defense for the listeners, and I love that.
It's also the first of many times that we will hear the timestamp. And Vin has mentioned in interviews over the years that, again, the reason why we have this recording is he wanted it for Sandy. And he wanted Sandy to know what time it was when this was happening. I don't know if any broadcaster has ever done that before, but he says it's 9:41. And then, of course, the line that gives me butterflies, he says the number of people in the ballpark and 1 million butterflies.
If you go right back to the very start of it, he starts it very much like the esteemed newscaster, right? That's the Cronkite. It's the 3 times prior. So we're getting the historical context of Sandy Koufax going out to take them out, but his tone shifted and suddenly he connected with Sandy and you could hear him get more conversational and more human as he discussed what this must feel for Sandy right now. And so from that newscaster, he became human Vin. And how poetic, how brilliant he was. You never, ever doubted that you could relate to that man sitting up there at the microphone.
I've always felt, Jesse, that even though a play-by-play announcer is not a normal journalist, you're absolutely a journalist. It is a 2 to 3 hour, or if you're in the Pacific Coast League, a 4-hour live broadcast. And you are the eyes and ears. And whenever I get stuck, I just think, if this was breaking news, what is the story? And just rely upon the journalism background to guide you in those moments.
You note he's giving every pitch fastball, curveball, fastball. He is letting you know the details at hand, but there's no excess words.
Let's get back to it.
In the Dodger dugout, Al Ferrara gets up and walks down near the runway. And it begins to get tough to be a teammate and sit in the dugout and have to watch. Sandy, back of the rubber, now toes it. All the boys in the bullpen straining to get a better look as they look through the wire fence in left field. 1-2, the count to Chris Krug. Koufax, feet together, now to his windup in the 1-2 pitch. Fastball outside, ball 2. A lot of people in the ballpark now are starting to see the pitches with their heart. The pitch was outside. Torborg tried to pull it over the plate, but Vargo, an experienced umpire, wouldn't go for it. 2-2, the count to Chris Krug. Sandy reading signs into his windup, 2-2 pitch. Fastball got him swinging.
Notice, Jesse, how often Vin lets the crowd tell the story after the ball, after that strikeout. Lets the crowd tell the story some and then gets locked back in on what's next. I love the watching the game with their heart. Yes. Economical use of words.
And he took us around the field. He took us, here's what it looks like for Sandy on the mound. His hand through his hair. Here's what it feels like in the stands. Here's what it looks like in the dugout. Here's what it looks like in the bullpen. And now back to Sandy on the mound.
Straining to get a better look. Such a great, eloquent phrase. Let's get back to it.
Sandy Koufax has struck out 12. He is 2 outs away from a perfect game. Here is Joe Amalfitano to pinch hit for Don Kessinger. Amalfitano is from Southern California, from San Pedro. He was an original bonus boy with the Giants. Joey's been around, and as we mentioned earlier, he has helped to beat the Dodgers twice. And on deck is Harvey Keene. Kennedy is tight to the bag at third. The fastball, a strike. 0-1 with 1 out in the 9th inning, 1-0 Dodgers. Sandy Reading into his windup, and the strike 1 pitch. Curveball, tap foul. 0-2. And Amalfitano walks away and shakes himself a little bit and swings the bat. And Koufax, with a new ball, takes a hitch at his belt and walks behind the mound. I would think that the mound at Dodger Stadium right now is the loneliest place in the world. Looks in to get his sign. 0-2 to Amalfitano. The strike 2 pitch to Joe. Fastball swung on and missed. Strike 3.
The loneliest place in the world. I get goosebumps every time I hear that, Jesse.
It's counterbalanced, though. When Joey Amalfitano steps in, Vin has time to say, let me give you his bio. He was a bonus baby. It comes from right here. Oh, by the way, he's hurt the Dodgers in the past. Here's the man on deck. The third baseman is tight to the line. Like all of these things that are the building blocks of the broadcast. Here's who the batter is. Here's the context. Here's what's going on. And then the ability to put what isn't directly observable, what someone can't look and see and say, there, that's tangible. The ability to put the intangible into words.
Going back to the idea that you're a journalist, it was headline news that Vin just gave. He didn't go deep into the background of Amalfitano, right? Local boy, here's where he's from. He's done some damage. You just got these headlines because now is not the time for a lengthy story about Amalfitano. Now is the time for headlines. So he just gave you, or bullet points, 3 quick bullet points. Now we're back in. And I think this is also where Vin's ability to just say, 0-1 is just so beautiful. The way that he just stretches out the 0-1.
I think that if you consider the name Amalfitano, that is an easy name for a broadcaster's tongue to trip over. But Vin never rushes himself. There's no hurry. There is the time to let it all lay out there.
All right, let's get back to it some more.
He is 1 out away from the promised land. And Harvey Keene is coming up. So Harvey Keene is batting for Bob Hendley. The time on the scoreboard is 9:44. The date, September the 9th, 1965. And Koufax working on veteran Harvey Keene. Sandy into his windup, and the pitch, a fastball for a strike. He has struck out, by the way, 5 consecutive batters. And that's gone unnoticed.
Until now.
Sandy ready, and the strike 1 pitch. Very high, and he lost his hat. He really forced that one. That's only the 2nd time tonight where I have had the feeling that Sandy threw instead of pitched, trying to get that little extra. And that time he tried so hard, his hat fell off. He took an extremely long stride to the plate, and Torborg had to go up to get it. 1-1 to Harvey Keene. Now he's ready. Fastball high, ball 2. You can't blame a man for pushing just a little bit now. Sandy backs off, mops his forehead, runs his left index finger along his forehead, dries it off on his left pants leg. All the while, Keene just waiting. Now Sandy looks in. Into his windup, and the 2-1 pitch to Keene. Swung on and missed. Strike 2.
All right. So now we're 1 strike away, and he's given us the 2nd timestamp. He's given us the date, September the 9th, 1965. And another little thing that Vin does, he uses the phrase, by the way, in the middle of a sentence. And it just sounds so just natural and conversational. I just love the way that he just mixes in, by the way.
Because he's talking right to you. And not only is he talking to you, he's asking you to put yourself into Sandy Koufax's shoes. You can't blame him for trying to get a little bit more on that fastball. Now imagine what he's doing with his index finger. Imagine how he must be feeling. Like this last part, after he's gone around and he's checked out the Dodgers in the dugout and the bullpen, he's given you the defense, he's told you about the batters. Everything right now is putting you right with Sandy on the mound.
It is 9:46 p.m. 2-2 to Harvey Keene. 1 strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed. A perfect game.
I'm going to pause it again here because 1 strike away. And then even just a perfect game.
He doesn't say strike 3, right? He doesn't say, and it's just swung on and missed, a perfect game.
Perfect broadcast.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, I think, because his heart and his head were in all the right places. His heart and his head were working together to say, imagine Sandy right from the very start. He puts you in that spot saying, what is this walk out to the mound? Pitcher's mound, the loneliest spot. Everybody looking at him, straining to see him. Here's the obstacles in his way. What must a man be thinking? And I think that choice, rather than to distance himself and call it from the vantage point of the broadcaster, that was a powerful choice.
He's laid out here at least 20 seconds already.
This is the veteran Vin understanding.
I wish I had started my stopwatch. Probably close to 40 seconds of layout.
On the scoreboard in right field, it is 9:46 p.m. in the city of the Angels, Los Angeles, California. And a crowd of 29,139 just sitting in to see the only pitcher in baseball history to hurl 4 no-hit, no-run games. He has done it 4 straight years, and now he capped it on his 4th no-hitter. He made it a perfect game. And Sandy Koufax, whose name will always remind you of strikeouts, did it with a flourish. He struck out the last 6 consecutive batters. So when he wrote his name in capital letters in the record books, that K stands out even more than the OUFAX.
So clever. So he sits back, he lets the moment breathe, and when he comes back, he puts it in historical, personal context. He talks about the attendance. There's so much that he comes back there ready to give you to make the moment full.
It's the master class of how you handle a big moment like that. By this point, Vin has called a couple. He's now 37 years old. And I think that this was, I was taking some notes here about Vin. He joined the Dodgers in 1950 at age 23. First time that he did a World Series was 1953. So 3 years later, Red Barber was in a salary dispute with Gillette, so he took over.
Josh, do you know the mistake that he made in that World Series?
Please remind me.
Okay, so Vin in interviews, and I've got a book here. I should not turn away from the microphone. I've got a book all about broadcasters saying what are they going through in the big moments and telling their personal perspective. And Vin was asked about the 1955 World Series and calling Johnny Padres winning it for the Dodgers. And even then, he's saying, on his drive in. He thinks back to his mistake with Ford in 53, and he doesn't want to make that mistake again. Well, you can find interviews with much older Vin still talking about in 1953, Whitey Ford, the Yankees pitcher, is a base runner at third base, and there's a flyout. And Vin, the broadcaster, notices that Whitey, in tagging up, has left too soon. Well, as the throw comes in, Whitey goes right back to the bag. But Vin gets on himself terribly for saying on the air that Whitey has left too soon. And I said, that could have gone wrong. Imagine if Whitey had been safe and there had been no appeal at third base, or there had been an appeal, but the umpires missed it. There was a lot about that where he goes, I could have gone terribly wrong and gotten myself in massive trouble. And so I think about early young Vin and the mistakes he was making and what he learned from that he was able to bring forward with him. That 1953 World Series was a formative experience in his life.
And it wasn't until the next year, 1954, that Vin became the lead announcer for the Dodgers. And so you think about the timing of it all. Back then, if you were the broadcaster of the team that was in the World Series, then you broadcasted the game nationally. So for Mel Allen and for Vin Scully and for Red Barber and the other legends, their teams are in the World Series, and so that's why they're there. But he was the caddy for Red Barber, and he's filling in on the World Series because Red's got a salary dispute with Gillette. But now we go forward. Vin is the lead broadcaster for the Dodgers for their final 4 years in Brooklyn. So by 1965, that perfect game we just listened to, it's now Vin's 8th year in Los Angeles. It's his 12th year as the lead voice. And so you think about all of the experiences that Vin has gained by this point in his career. The beginning of TV, still primarily radio, and it's like it's all come together. His Malcolm Gladwell number of hours has all come together leading to this perfect game, which in my mind, so others might disagree, this is when Vin became the legendary Vin.
I agree. I think an enormous part of that was the relationships that he forged with the players. Because if you think about Vin in the 1950s with the Brooklyn Dodgers, there was a youngster who came up from the minor leagues but didn't have the command, and Sandy Koufax, who, like Vin, was a native New Yorker. And I think the two of them growing up together in Los Angeles, where Vin was given the steering wheel, and there's no more Connie Desmond and no more Red Barber, and here's your show. All the while that Sandy, now out in Los Angeles, has flourished and become dominant. And I do think that that's such an important moment for both of them. For Vin, out in this great new frontier, Los Angeles has presented so much to baseball as a market, but to Vin, here it is. You're coming across, you've got the Dodgers, who, oh, by the way, immediately in 1959, they're making it to the World Series and they're winning a championship. Now in the 60s, they are dominant. And here's Koufax and Drysdale at the top of the world, and you are putting it together. I agree with you that his broadcasting went to the next level at the right time for all of this. It's such a mesmerizing thing to see that it all worked out all at once.
The right time. So much of Vin's career was timing, and I know I've gotten fortunate enough to talk to Vin about this. It was perfect timing that the transistor radio became such an important part of American culture. I worked with Ken Levine on postgame Dodger Talk for 3 years, and Ken, much older than me, told me these fabulous stories about how when you walked around Dodger Stadium, and especially LA Memorial Coliseum, this was built for the Olympics. This was a football field. The Dodgers played 4 years at the LA Memorial Coliseum. The seats were so far away from the field, but there was the transistor radio. And so people brought these transistor radios to the game so that they could have Vin be their eyes, even though they were there. And Ken Levine has told me that when you walked around Dodger Stadium, you would hear Vin's voice from section to section to section because so many people brought their transistor radios. And so Vin, in this perfect game, is not just describing this for those who are in their car and in their backyard, but he's describing it for the people who are at the ballpark. And because there was only 29,139, it's not out of the question that Koufax heard Vin himself at certain moments in that game.
Yes. There's a great story that Chuck Thompson, the classic Orioles broadcaster, tells that I encourage folks to seek out about the Orioles taking on the Angels and the fans erupting from time to time throughout the series. And Chuck going, really, this is coinciding with our new reliever coming in from the bullpen. And that's when he brings out the binoculars and realizing all the Angels fans, all the fans there are listening to the Dodgers and they keep hitting home runs. And Vin gives the call. So the Angels crowd cheering on the Dodgers highlights because everybody's got their transistor.
Yeah, what a special moment all of that becomes. And I mean, there's other stories about how Vin was thumbing through a media guide and he saw that one of the umpires, it was his birthday. And so he just says to the crowd, all right, after this batter, we're going to start wishing the umpire a happy birthday. Let's sing happy birthday to him. And the umpire has no idea why the crowd starts singing happy birthday. And it's because Vin told them to over the transistor radios.
We can talk about that connection. Then there's the poetry, the loneliest place, the mound, right? The millions of butterflies. It is a fundamentally sound half inning of play-by-play. Vin is ready for every pitch. You know exactly what happens on every pitch. You know exactly who the batter is, and you understand everything that is going on. The play-by-play is sound because Vin was sound. Connie and Red drilled him back in the day, all the while they were fighting with each other. And so the fact that he can build his foundation upon such sound fundamentals and add in the poetry and add in the humor and add in the anecdotes and all of the homework that he did, that is all combined to make everything all the more special.
And oh, by the way, he didn't jinx anything. He said that it's a perfect game throughout all of Vin's 18 no-hitters, I believe it is, 3 perfect games. He used the phrase perfect game, no-hitter all the time because he understood that this is what you need to do. It's literally your job. I'm curious, Jesse, as we start to wrap things up, have you called a no-hitter in your career, or how many if you have?
Oh, man. I have called, 5 no-hitters now? I've called quite a few. My thinking on the jinx of the no-hitter goes right along with Vin and Red Barber, which is doesn't exist. However, I think that there are players and fans who believe that it does exist, and they will get very angry if they think that you jinxed it. But no, I do think there is that journalistic, hey, there's something special going on. But there was one year where I called 3 no-hitters in the same year.
Wow.
And let me tell you this before I ask you about your own no-hitter experience. My heart is jumping out of my chest. I'm feeling butterflies, and it's not just in the 9th. As the game goes to the 7th inning, I get nervous, and my palms might start to get sweaty. Mom spaghetti. It's such a nervous thing for everybody in attendance because it's real. As a baseball fan, as an observer, if there's the chance for history in front of you, it affects you. It should. You're a human being. And how on earth you steel yourself and you still deliver your words articulate, plus you voice the emotion of it all. That is a difficult challenge to find your mind and to find your tongue in that spot when your heart is racing that much.
I've never called a no-hitter. 0.
Oh, really?
0 no-hitters. There has only been 2 times that we've even gotten to the 9th inning without any hits. Welcome to the Pacific Coast League. And in both times, the leadoff batter in the 9th inning got a hit. So I never even got close, really. But I do know that once you get through 6 innings, and it's so different now because nobody goes 9. So you're talking about different pitchers who come in. But I know that when I did get to the 9th inning, because I've listened to Vin, this is the infield. This is the outfield. This is the name of the ballpark. You kind of go back to those first inning things that you do to set the scene, because it's quite possible that there's new people, lots of new people who have now started to listen to the broadcast. And I think about timestamps, and I think about, you don't want to completely just copy everything that Vin did. But I know that my mind starts to really, really race when you get to the 8th inning about these are the things that I must do because it's what Vin did. And these are the things that really make it special.
The journalists were not wrong in 1956 that certain Major League Baseball broadcasters were talking too much. And they would not be wrong today if they said, there are certain broadcasters who talk too much. And Vin went too far away from it and let the game breathe too much as a young man. And by the time that he was a middle-aged man, when you're 37, you're young in society. You're an old baseball player, but for a broadcaster, you're very young. But as he got older, he found that fine line, right? He found that happy medium of when does the game breathe and when is it time for you to add to it?
All right, this was super fun. Before we sign off, we did not plan this, but I got the Vin Scully microphone shirt. And what are you wearing, Jesse?
I'm wearing my Sandy Koufax shirt right now.
Did not even plan this. A lot of fun, as these always are, Jesse. Thanks so much for coming up with this idea for us. Once again, he's Jesse, I'm Josh, and this is Crafting the Call.